Australia has just sparked global disbelief with talk of a plan to flood its unforgiving outback. The plan carries a price tag of $200 billion, and it targets one of the driest places on Earth, where evaporation can outpace rainfall 10 to 1. Why consider such a gamble now? Rising droughts and crowded coasts are forcing a radical question. Could rewriting the fate of the interior save the nation, or doom it? The true stakes begin here. Rainfall maps tell a stark story. Over 85% of Australians live within 50 kilometers of the coast, pressed between the Pacific and the continent's sunburnt heart. The outback stretches for thousands of kilometers, yet receives less than 250 millimeters of rain each year, barely a tenth of what falls on the eastern seaboard. In the past decade, multi-year droughts have become more frequent, with the 2019 to 2020 season-breaking records for low precipitation and high temperatures. Riverbeds in the interior run dry for years at a time. On the coast, meanwhile, cities like Sydney and Brisbane swell with new arrivals, straining water reserves and pushing property prices into crisis territory. Satellite data confirms the trend. Annual evaporation in the outback can reach 3 meters, erasing what little rain does fall. Farmers in Queensland and New South Wales have faced water restrictions and crop failures with rising regularity. The Black Summer bushfires of 2019 to 2020 scorched millions of hectares, fueled by parched landscapes and record heat. Government reports warn that climate change will only intensify these pressures. Longer droughts, more erratic rainfall, and even greater competition for water. In this climate of anxiety, the idea of moving water inland, once dismissed as fantasy, has edged back into public debate. For some, it is a desperate measure. For others, it is the only way to protect the country's future against a drying continent. Water disappears almost as quickly as it arrives in the outback. In places like the Lake Eyre Basin, annual evaporation can strip away 3 meters of water, 10 times more than the average rainfall. Even when storms sweep across the interior, most rain never lingers long enough to soak into the ground. What looks like a vast, empty plain is actually a patchwork of fragile soils, cracking clays that swell with moisture and then split apart as they dry, orange-red sands that drift with the wind, and floodplains laced with hidden salt. When water pools after rare rains, it quickly draws salts up from the earth below, leaving behind crusts that choke plant roots and poison new growth. Attempts to tame this landscape have often ended in retreat. In the 19th century, surveyors mapped out towns and farms across the Channel Country, only to abandon them when wells ran dry or salt crept into the fields. Records from the early 1900s list dozens of failed settlements, names fading from maps as families packed up and left. Cotton dams, built with hope and borrowed money, cracked and crumbled in the relentless heat. Even today, the bones of old machinery rust beside empty water holes, silent reminders of how little room for error the outback allows. Any plan to flood this region faces a simple arithmetic. Evaporation outpaces rainfall by a factor of 10. The soils, shaped by cycles of drought and flood, are quick to unravel when pushed too far. Before considering the promise of new water, the brutal reality is clear. Nature here has always demanded respect, and history punishes those who forget. After months of silence, a single rainstorm can change everything. In the Channel Country, floodwaters crawl across the flats, filling ancient riverbeds and spilling into the Lake Eyre Basin. From above, satellite images capture a transformation. What was once a pale, cracked expanse turns deep green almost overnight. The NDVI index, which measures plant growth from space, spikes higher than at any other time of year. Within weeks, the desert blooms. Mitchell grass and wildflowers erupt from the soil, and flocks of pelicans, drawn from hundreds of kilometers away, descend on new lakes teeming with fish and frogs. For a brief window, the Outback pulses with life. A pastoralist near Birdsville once described it as life from nowhere, marveling at how the land could go from dust to abundance without warning. Yet the miracle is fleeting. As the floodwaters retreat, salt crusts form along the shorelines, and the green fades back to brown. By the end of the season, the desert is silent again, waiting for the next unpredictable surge. These rare floods offer a glimpse of what water can do, how even a temporary pulse can awaken the land. But the transformation never lasts. Nature's own experiment always ends in retreat, leaving behind questions about what might be possible if water could stay longer or return more often. Grand visions for turning Australia's interior green have always collided with the arithmetic of water. In the late 1930s, Dr. John Bradfield's Inland Sea proposal promised to transform the Outback by diverting rivers from Queensland. Yet even the most optimistic estimates inflated the available runoff by more than double. Decades of weather records showed that the catchments earmarked for diversion, Tully, Herbert, Burdekin, simply could not deliver the steady volumes required. The seasonal surges that looked promising on paper vanished during drought years, leaving canals and dams starved of flow. CSIRO's 2021 assessment delivered a final verdict. The hydrology does not add up. Modern modeling confirmed that evaporation in the Lake Eyre Basin would erase any gains. Every year, up to 3 meters of water would vanish into the air, outpacing any diversion scheme. Salinity would rise, soils would degrade, and the supposed inland sea would shrink to a salt pan as quickly as it appeared. The economics followed the science. Minimum costs of $12 to $20 billion for even the smallest versions, with no guarantee of success. Parliament hesitated, wary of repeating past mistakes. Reports from the 1960s and the 1980s echoed the same concerns: too little water, too much loss, and a continent unwilling to gamble billions on a mirage. Official reviews left the Bradfield dream on the shelf, a lesson in the limits of ambition without evidence. Forecasting the Outback's future now relies on tools that did not exist when the first inland sea schemes were drawn up. Today, satellites like GRACE track subtle changes in groundwater from hundreds of kilometers above the Earth. Model ensembles built from decades of climate and river data can simulate how water will move across the Channel Country or pool in the Lake Eyre Basin under a range of possible weather patterns. These models are not just theoretical. Each run draws on real-time rainfall, evaporation, and soil moisture readings, narrowing the gap between prediction and reality. Remote sensors buried in the ground and mounted on telemetry towers feed continuous updates on water levels, salinity, and even vegetation health. Engineers now talk about reversible gates and smart weirs, designed to let floodwaters flow in when conditions are right, then release them before salts can build up. This approach borrows from nature, aiming to stretch the benefits of rare floods without triggering the disasters of the past. The promise is a system that listens and responds, not one that imposes itself blindly on the land. The price tag attached to these inland water dreams is staggering: $200 billion. It dwarfs the cost of Australia's largest infrastructure projects. Independent economists warn that even smaller pilot versions would require public funding on a scale not seen since the Snowy Mountains scheme, with annual maintenance and energy costs stacking up for decades. Agriculture, energy, and transport sectors would all feel the ripple effects. New irrigation zones could shift the balance of food production inland, while remote mining and logistics hubs might spring up along artificial lakes. Yet every dollar spent faces a counterweight in risk. The Outback soils, already loaded with ancient salts, could tip into crisis if water lingers too long. Salinity would rise, choking crops and native vegetation. Invasive species, from carp to cane toads, could find new highways across the continent. Proponents point to possible rewards: cooler microclimates, bursts of carbon capture from greening deserts, even a chance to nudge local rainfall higher. But these benefits remain hypothetical, tested only in the brief windows after natural floods. The ledger is unsettled: massive investment and national transformation on one side, the specter of ecological collapse on the other. Today, bold visions for the Outback remain more fantasy than fact. Yet, as water grows scarcer and climate extremes mount, pressure for radical solutions only intensifies. The real test isn't building an inland sea. It is facing what we are willing to risk for a future that is already changing. Share your thoughts below.